So real mowers or golf course lawn mowers like these have become increasingly popular among homeowners in the last few years. However, these machines are not the same as your standard homeowner lawn mowers. Not even close. They're a little more complicated and the maintenance can be expensive. I want to talk about some things that you should consider before you decide to purchase one and give you some things to think about from some recent experiences of mine. Here we go. So for those who haven't been keeping up around here, I recently obtained this John Deere 180B greens mower, and it's well used, but it's in working shape now. When I got it, it had been sitting for a while, and it's been sitting this winter season, but I knew when I got it that it would need some work. So my first suggestion would be, before you even consider buying one of these, try and find out what needs to be replaced, and see if those items factor into your budget and if it makes sense for you before you decide to grab one. For me, I needed to replace this bail handle here on the back. That was probably the most expensive item I needed to replace, which is kind of funny because it's just a piece of metal, but since you buy it from John Deere, they're going to charge you for it. And I'll talk more about that too. I also needed to replace the belts. They were broken. I needed to replace the air filter. It didn't exist. I had a flat tire and I opted to go for an inner tube because the tire itself is worn enough that I didn't have to want to deal with it going flat again on the tubeless part, so I just put a tube in it. The bed knife is out of shape. I needed to replace the bed knife, so I've got a new bed knife and screws that I'm going to drop off with my sharpening guy because I was planning on having this freshly sharpened anyways. Now, some of these repairs and replacements you can do yourself, but I want to caution you, do the research first. Don't try and just wing it. That's what I did, and it kind of cost me a little bit, particularly when I was replacing the belts. It was my understanding that to replace the belts you had to dismount the motor and tip it over out of the way to make room to put the new belts on. I later found out that wasn't the case, and it caused me some issues later on down the road. Tipping the motor over a little bit was just enough for me to get oil into the air filter housing and into the carburetor. On top of all of that, I put the belts on too tight and I wasn't even able to move the machine. So not only did I have a mower that wouldn't start, I also couldn't move it. Now, lucky for me, my dad is a little bit more mechanically inclined than I am, and he offered to take a look at it and see if he couldn't get it running. So I dropped it off at his place, and the next day he had it running. Here's what he did.
Back, okay, we got spark. So then I took the fuel line off. No, I took the bowl off. And I'm like, what the heck? Why is it so oily? Then I remembered, oh, he took the engine off and he turned it on its side. So all the oil came out through the intake valve into the carburetor. So the gas in the bowl was saturated with oil. So I cleaned it all out, and then before I put it back, I opened the gas valve to make sure it had flow. Flushed it out with good flow, put the bowl back, tightened the screw, put the choke on, flipped the switch, boom, fired right up.
And that brings me into my third tip. The dealer might not always be the best place to have this thing fixed, especially if you're doing work on the motor. I took this to my John Deere dealer before I took it to my dad, and they quoted me $545 to replace the carburetor. Yeah, you heard that right. So make sure that you can take it to somebody like a small engine repair shop, or somebody that you know that works on small engines or knows about small engines or things like that. search around in your local network before you go to the dealer, because the dealer's always going to charge you the most for repairs and for parts and things like that. One other thing about getting parts from dealers is that the dealers are always going to default to selling you manufacturer parts, in this case John Deere parts. But depending on the part that you're looking for, they might have third-party items available to them or even in stock. And if they don't have them in stock, they're allowed to order them. And the third-party parts are significantly cheaper than manufacturer parts. I saved a ton of money getting inner tube for the tire and the filter housing by getting it through a third party. I ordered it from the dealer, but they're third-party parts. They work just as good, they get the job done, but I probably saved a good $100 between those two parts just by getting third party. So there you go, there's a quick recap of what's been going on with my experience with the John Deere greens mower so far. It's been a learning experience for sure, and I wanted to recap you here and just kind of share what I've learned and share my experiences with you with this mower so that you can have a little bit easier if you decide to get into something like this. I'm really excited to have this mower. I'm going to be using it on my backyard putting green, and I look forward to starting to make content around that and the rest of the yard too really soon. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. Got lots to look forward to this year. So that's going to go ahead and do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.
No.